Hello and welcome to a special post or game theory here. It's not post game theory. My goodness. We got Tim Cato here. We're going to talk about the Dallas Mavericks. This felt like an emergency. We needed to talk about the Mavericks because I can't remember a messier month for a single team in the last 10 years of the NBA. So we're going to talk to Tim about it and try and understand what's going on in Dallas. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Tim, what's going on, man?
I like that intro. You know, I am a listener to the pod, but I don't think I've ever seen that. It's the word that comes to mind is snazzy. It's a snazzy intro.
It is snazzy. Yeah, we try and do things a little bit upscale here, not very. Like we still keep it lo-fi. Let's be honest here. But
professional DIY.
Professional DIY. There it is, Tim. Mm-hmm. So let's start here. Kyrie Irving out for the year, obviously. Now has a torn ACL. Presumably, given that this is something between a 9 and 12 month window where it takes guys to get back, that holds him out for a large portion of next season as well. This comes on the heels of the Luka Doncic deal, which in Dallas has not been received well, I think we can say.
I think Don in Dallas too.
Yeah. And B, it comes on the heels of the organization making this massive bet into Kyrie Irving, basically relying on him for every single thing that they can do on offense. Like we can talk about Anthony Davis and how him being out obviously hinders their offense, but like Anthony Davis is more of a play finisher than a play creator. And everything was on Kyrie's shoulders here. I would argue that like Kyrie was almost more important than Anthony Davis to this entire thing.
Yeah.
Based off of just how much they were betting on him. And now he's going to be out for a lion's share of the window that I think Nico Harrison and this front office and ownership group and coaching staff, some of the coaching staff, some of the front office, I don't mean to paint with a broad brush here. I'm sure there were dissenting opinions. We're betting on in making the Luka Doncic deal. So how are Dallas fans holding up? Like, let's start here. It feels funereal to me, in a way that we'll talk about this next, but like, I can't remember an organization feeling this funereal, in this situation.
Yeah, this is as catastrophic and as seismic and as franchise altering of a month as you could ever imagine. Dallas went from a team that, 9 months ago was in the NBA Finals and, shipped half of that starting lineup away and, shipped away the architect and Luka, but behind all it for a bet that always seemed awfully unwise. And the real damning thing is like when Kyrie went down, it was obvious right away that it was going to be a devastating injury, that the team's season was almost certainly over. But everybody was still rooting, hoping for Kyrie's sake, that it wasn't this, that it wasn't the most serious outcome. And now we're looking at a situation where there is precedent of players younger than Kyrie, Jamal Murray a few seasons ago, tearing an ACL in March and missing the entirety of the following season. Kyrie is someone, and this is full credit to him, that takes his full time to come back from injuries. This has been, or at least since he's got to Dallas, this has been something that's been known about him. And this is, like, he has every right to do that. He knows his body better than anybody. And so it is obviously way, way, way too soon to know for sure what the timeline is going to look like for Kyrie Irving. He hasn't even had the surgery yet. But it's a consideration you have to have going into the summer. If you are the Mavericks front office, that is one contingency that you have to think about and plan for. And even in the best case scenario where it's, maybe 10 or 11 months and he's able to get back on the court, it's you still have to go into the summer building two teams. A team to win enough in the regular season to make sure that you can be the contenders you believe you are if Kyrie is back to himself and back on the court. And even then, obviously, you can't guarantee that Kyrie is going to be back to himself. We know that ACLs it's an injury you can come back from in 12 months, but you don't always look like yourself until 18 after. And an 18-month timeline is pushing into, like, Kyrie Irving is 35, 34. Like, this is as catastrophic of a situation as you can imagine. It's very hard after this injury to imagine that even the vision that Nico Harrison had of the Mavericks with Anthony Davis on the roster with Kyrie, it's really hard to imagine it even being realized next season. It's really hard for it to be imagined the following season just because of the ages of the players involved. It might, as soon as this, started, it might already be over.
It's crazy. It's just crazy that it turned this quickly. Like, it's one of those things where it was obviously very predictable that this was a bad idea to do Luka for Anthony Davis, because Anthony Davis has his own injury questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also think an underrated thing is that Kyrie is a player, God love him, he's done everything right in Dallas since he's been there. He has, been an incredibly important piece of this Mavericks team. Just literally earlier this week, like, Bryce had Kyrie Irving as a third team All-NBA player this season, and I think that was completely reasonable, to be honest with you. He was definitely in my top 20 or so. So that's how good he's been this year. He's averaging 25 points a game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 47, 40, 92. Like, he's been insanely good. But he is a player that also has a history of injuries. Do you know when the last time Kyrie Irving played 70 games in a season was?
Sophomore year, right?
It was 2017.
2017, okay.
Yeah, he has played 70 games in a season just 3 times in his career at this point. And he, again, turns 33 in, I think, like 2 weeks, basically. So it was all just this house of cards built on these two players who are remarkable Hall of Fame players that get hurt regularly. And you're doing this because you're betting against Luka Doncic aging well. Like, none of it ever made sense. So I guess I ask this question. Can you remember a worse month for an NBA team?
No.
I have one answer. Like,
Okay.
I have one answer that I can think of. I honestly can't, like, think of one in the 2020s, certainly. I have to go all the way back. Like, I will hear out Cavs fans that say, like, the decision. Like, I think that's, like, a real answer here, because everything was built on this hometown player being in Cleveland, and he builds up this massive, like, thing where he's going on ESPN with Jim Gray, and, like, Cavs fans, trust me, I was at Ohio State that time. Like, I know this. Like, Cavs fans had believed and, like, bought into it that he's going to stay. Like, he's doing this to raise a bunch of money for charities in Cleveland, and he's staying. He's going to do this. And then he decides he's leaving. He's taking his talents to South Beach. Like, that felt like a kick in the dick, right? This, I don't know. Like, I would hear out a case that this is worse than this because it's such an own goal by the organization itself. Like, LeBron James has his own agency as a human being by nature of hitting free agency. Like, Luka, every indication is he was going to sign the Supermax. He was going to be there long term. He was going to be the guy. and you just decide to like say, no, deuces, we're good.
I think this is way worse. I think this
I
is way
think it
worse
might
than
be
the decision.
worse.
I think it's worse
Yeah.
because as bad as that felt for Cleveland fans, they had an object of, ire. They had LeBron
Yeah.
James to be angry at. The Mavericks fans don't know, there is a huge percentage of them that don't feel engaged in their team. Their fandom is lapsing because it is the own organization that has done this to them. So there is a percentage of people who, everybody is reacting to it. Every fandom has their own unique reaction and relationship to the team right now at this point. But a huge percentage of them are still Mavs fans, but just without the same passion. A huge percentage of them have lost the ability or say that they don't enjoy basketball just generally at all. Like they've completely tuned out of the NBA. This isn't a situation where everybody, in Dallas is going and being Lakers fans. This is a situation where the NBA is losing fans. Like that is
Yeah.
how much that's how much it pained them.
Well, it's a football state. Like that's the
Yeah.
reality. Like Texas is a football state. Like I grew up in Pittsburgh, right? Like Pittsburgh is a football city, like full stop. I remember like when I was growing up, like Pitt basketball was fucking incredible. Like when they built the Peterson Event Center, that thing was like absolutely rocking when they had like Julius Page and Brandon Knight and Jerron Brown and all these dudes that were awesome and led Pitt to like real heights under Ben Howland and Jamie Dixon, right? And as soon as it turned, as soon as like they stopped being competitive, it turns like that. Like it goes. So I can
Right.
completely identify with a lot of what you're saying here in terms of like as soon as they hired Kevin Stallings and they went like full losses, like for a full season, basically, nobody gave a shit about like Pitt basketball for a good stretch there. And honestly, I don't think it's recovered yet.
And
I
to the
don't know
extent
that like I feel like these people like can not, maybe you're not understanding how hard it can be to turn those engaged consumers and re-engage them again after they leave, I guess is my point.
it was a trade being mocked, and the only way to win back a percentage of fans who are not the diehards who are grappling with the emotions and the feelings, but people just want to enjoy the product. When all the headlines they're seeing is how this might be the worst trade of all time, the way to win
Yeah.
them back at least is to give them some joy on the court. And now that ability is sapped. It's just going to be apathy. And it's just apathy built upon apathy. To the extent that Dallas was a basketball team, a basketball city, it was because of Dirk Nowitzki. And that's obviously, this point has been made ad nauseum. But, that's the other thing that is so, you mentioned kick to the dick earlier. That's what all the reporting, all the comments from Luka is saying, that he planned to be a one athlete city or one city type superstar, and he was going to follow in that direction. And there's been so many comments made that have been upsetting and enraging to Mavericks fans. Certainly Patrick Dumont coming out and naming a bunch of players who it was the comments where he said if you want to take a vacation, you shouldn't do it here in Dallas, and named a bunch of players from the 80s who actually don't have the
he brought up Shaq and talked about work ethic. Like
fans got really mad because he didn't mention Dirk Nowitzki. And then yesterday Nico Harrison released a statement that also mentioned it addressed Kyrie Irving's injury, and it mentioned Kobe and Mamba mentality. Also didn't address Dirk Nowitzki. And on one hand, that is
also mentioned a Laker who you just traded Luka to.
Yeah. It's enraging to fans that Dirk doesn't get brought up in, these moments. But at the same time, they clearly aren't embracing what Dirk meant to this franchise. So it's like, I think the anger would be there if they did bring up Dirk, because they are acting, they have taken this franchise and taken it away from the identity, Dirk Nowitzki made it relevant, and they have taken all of the lessons that he instilled in this franchise and done the exact opposite. It is no longer Dirk's franchise at this point. And so, like, even if they did mention him, I think it would be anger for a whole different set of ways. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. because that's the thing about this trade. There's almost no way to win from it. And now, like, any chance of just a panacea of, hey, at least this team is fun, and Anthony Davis just had, a 30-15-10 game, like that, that would not have cured a lot of the diehard fans and their apathy and their loss of passion towards this franchise, but it at least would have distracted and covered over some of this. And now it's just going to be a parade of apathy and dick punching as Luka Doncic and the Lakers just keep rising and succeeding and thriving.
It's really insane. Like, the more we talk about this, like, this has a chance to go down as the worst trade in sports history. And look, like, I was somebody that when this thing happened, I was like trying to understand it. I completely disagreed with it. I thought it was a terrible deal from the moment that it happened. I at least tried to like understand, get into Nico Harrison's head, just be like, okay, can it really be this bad? Like, is it possible that being around Luka is this bad? Is it possible that, like, on the inside, it's terrible and his work ethics are like way worse than what we think? And like, I asked around as you have, like, I haven't gotten that impression that it was that bad. I haven't gotten the impression that it was anywhere near the level that requires trading him for Anthony Davis, who's in his 30s and has an injury history. Like, none of this makes any sense. And I feel just truly, truly horrendous for Mavs fans, none more than Jason Gallagher, whose dog I saw is named Nico. Shout out to Jason Gallagher.
Totally unrelated too, like before Nico even became the GM. Yeah.
Shout out to Jason Gallagher, who is the best and is the producer over of like I forget what the
Young Man
network's
of the
called
Three.
now. Is Young Man of the Three.
Yeah.
So
it's just insane. Man, I had another point. I was about to go off somewhere else and I lost it. So we can.
Well, here, I'll give you this. So now they have to figure out where to go from here, right? Because you have to move forward from this in some way, shape, or form. I ask you this question. Anthony Davis has played 31 minutes for the Dallas Mavericks so far. Is there a chance that he plays 31 minutes for the Dallas Mavericks and they decide, based off of this injury to Kyrie, based off of what their flexibility is, which is not particularly great moving forward, based off the fact that I believe that they have none of their picks from 2027 to 2031, if I remember correctly.
To 2030, and obviously two of them are swaps, but they're swaps with, I believe, Houston and Oklahoma City. So, like, those are
not great.
Yeah.
Not a great situation.
Yeah.
It's not like Orlando having a swap next season with Phoenix and Washington, right, where they get the middle of that. And it's like, oh shit, like Phoenix might be terrible next year. This might be great. I ask you this. How do you go about pivoting out of this? And do you think there's any chance that the Mavs just say, like, we might have to cut our losses now and just move this thing forward and try to get draft picks, try to get like our own picks back if we can from some places and move on? Because, like, I'll tell you this, if they decide to continue forward with this build, I don't think this injury in any way, shape, or form hinders Kyrie's level of leverage over the organization. Like, if I'm him and they're deciding like they still want to go all in with this roster, and they'll know this, like Kyrie will know this going into his negotiations, and I think his aunt is his agent. Like, they'll know this going in. If they decide to continue down this road, he still walks in there and goes, I want a 4-year max, full like 35%. And they basically have to give it to him, because otherwise he just walks in free agency. And if he walks in free agency, it is genuinely curtains for this thing.
Yeah.
So like they have no answers here to try and like continue to build positively around a Kyrie Anthony Davis core unless you sign him to like a full 4-year max.
My gut before the injury was that he would get a raise over what he's making now. And I agree totally with the leverage, But my gut was that it wouldn't be a full max. It wouldn't be 4 years. It'd probably be 3 years, and it'd be more money than he's making now. But we're talking like $5 million year over year. So rewarded for what he's been doing. That was my gut. And that was before this happened. Now it's just it's entirely different. And if Nico Harrison is here, he is going to believe in this vision. And so I don't, I believe he will be GM next season. So I do not believe like Anthony Davis will still be on the roster. They're not going to pivot out. They made two, you can't like fully explain away, okay, freak injuries, but yes, this has been a cursed season for them. Even if the Luka trade hadn't happened, it was very possible this was going to be another gap year for Dallas because Derek Lively may not play the rest of the regular season. Even before this, at this point, there's no reason for him to play the rest of the regular season. But there was a chance that he wasn't going to be back on the court. Do you
know what the crazy thing is, to speak to the gap year idea, right?
Right.
Like, I felt like last year had a chance to be a gap year because they were like integrating PJ Washington and they were trying to make things work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you have Luka, and this is the other thing about Luka, he is literally one of like the 5 best playoff performers in NBA history. And you can go and look at any number on that. Like 5 is honestly probably being conservative on what he's been able to do at this point.
Yeah.
You have a shot. Like you are in with a shot as long as you make that top 6 group. Right.
Right.
So I don't even know that, like, I don't like totally disagree with you in terms of the way it was shaping up due to the injuries and everything with Luka, and you were going to have to reintegrate Luka after the calf injury and everything. But like, when you have that guy, you just have a puncher's chance at the end of the day. And they just beat last season. They have confidence against the team that everybody thinks is going to make the finals in Oklahoma City, as you know. So like, I don't know, man. Like that's another thing that makes this so hard. They become a less dangerous playoff team to me because you lose this guy who consistently steps up in the playoffs. Sorry, side tangent.
And I think Nico, like, I think he truly had this belief that Dallas was going to be in the finals again. They're going to be facing Boston again. And, some of what the AD trade was his belief that this team, even after revamping it, wasn't good enough to beat Boston, which might be true. I don't think Anthony Davis, like, it makes you different in that hypothetical matchup. But more importantly, it just ignores so much of what allowed the team to even make it to the finals last year. Obviously, there was no scenario where it makes sense. Even if Dallas was 5% better, if this lineup, if this team was healthy and was in the finals and playing Boston, and if that gave you a 5% better matchup, all hypotheticals, you can't go trade him. You can't trade your best player who got you to the NBA finals and everything that he does to allow that to happen. So
yeah, it's wild. It's truly wild. Like, it's like kind of unfathomable to me, but like, I think you're right that they're not going to pivot out of this. I think they're going to lean into this at the end of the day.
And we don't know a lot about Patrick Dumont, so like maybe he has been, what we know is that he's not a huge basketball guy. I bet he's getting a crash course in basketball 101 as we speak. There's really no other option to. So maybe he gets to a point where he's like, okay, actually, I don't agree with that move that I agreed with then. But now after reading and seeing all of this, it's plausible. I don't know. It's kind of a black box of new ownerships in terms of like trying to figure out reported info and how they think and how they feel. So that, I think, is the scenario where they would move on from Nico, bring in a new front office and pivot away. But my best guess is Nico Harrison is the GM next season. And if he's the GM, then yes, they're going to try to make this work.
So here's what I will ask you. Should they pivot out of this? Like, forget like what they will do, right? Like, right. I agree with you. I think that's probably what they're going to do. They very clearly should try to pivot out of this, right?
I think so, yeah.
Like, if you can sign and trade, like get Kyrie to opt in, or like get him to opt out and like sign and trade him to an organization where he wants to go to. You move Anthony Davis immediately. You move like a few other dudes like Daniel Gafford, like a few others. You try to get as many of your own picks back as you can within this structure, and then like try to build there. That feels like the idea to me. But as we know, many of these people who work in front offices, not wrongly, right? Like it's the reality of wanting to keep your job, are self-interested and want to keep their job. And if Nico decides I'm trading Anthony Davis after having seen him in a Dallas Mavericks uniform for 31 minutes, he does not have a job. Like there's no way you can let him continue to have a job at that point. So I think it's the right call to pivot if I was them. Like undeniably, if we're looking at this logically without the, situation where we're trying to decide, okay, these self-interested people, what are they going to do? Everything like that. That's a piece of logic as well. But if we're looking at it purely like from analytical terms of what is best for the Dallas Mavericks long-term organization and construction, it's not hoping that like a 35-year-old AD and a 34-year-old Kyrie can lead you to a title in what I guess we're hoping for 2027 at this point, in all likelihood. By the time Kyrie gets all the way back from his injury, it's probably pivoting out now.
I think logically that does make the most sense. I said just a second ago, I think it makes the most sense. But I mean, I don't know if pivoting out now it gets you far enough into the rebuild timeline that you're still going to have to take your losses with that 4-year run of picks that you don't own, that you don't have control over. That's the thing that I wonder. Like if you trade AD, you can get some more first round picks back, but like it's they're not really easy picks to just go get back. This isn't a Phoenix situation. And not having control over them just puts you at the peril. Like it feels almost guaranteed that they're going to go through a period of penance for the decisions they made. And if that's the case, it's almost maybe better that you could have, there's a 5% chance that you could have a little bit of joy with a mercenary team, but it's your best chance of being relevant in the NBA for probably 6 years is that next season, if you're lucky, if things go right, and Kyrie is able to come back, or the season after, that might be your last chance for relevancy for a half decade. So maybe you just stick with it. Maybe you just stick with it and eat the losses. And it's an impossible situation. That's basically what I'm describing. It is an impossible situation that was completely self-inflicted.
So the Mavericks have their own pick this year, if I remember correctly.
They do.
Right? Like they have their own draft pick.
They do.
They also have next year's draft pick. These two drafts, 2025 and 2026, like if they were to like really lean in, which I think that they're going to have an easy time doing at this point, and like really tank this out this year, right? You could maybe end up, there are like 20 games left in the year. Maybe you can go like 3-17. Like I think that's not like out of the realm of possibility.
They lost to Sacramento and Kai Jones was their best player, and now Kai Jones is questionable. He might be injured too. Yeah, they're going to lose a lot of games.
Like you could end up with like 47 losses, and 47 might get you to like 9th in the lottery odds. And that at least like gives you a 20% chance at the top 4 and like a 4% chance at like the number 1 overall pick, right? Next year's draft, I think shapes up as being even better than this year's draft. Like really only like Cooper and Dylan are the two guys that like I really like in this class. Next year, there's Cam Boozer, there's Darren Peterson, there's AJ DeBanza, there's, some people really like Nate Ammon. Like there are a number of, higher level talents in next year's class that are really interesting. So you could like really tank next year if you want to. The picks that they have out currently, 2027 first rounder to Charlotte, 2028 first rounder to Oklahoma City. And that's a swap.
Yeah.
2029 is like a weird deal where it's Houston and Brooklyn. And do you know off the top of your head who has the preferred there?
I do not.
So
I actually have
it looks okay. So Houston, it looks like, receives the two most favorable of its 2029 first, Dallas's 2029 first, and Phoenix's 2029 first. So I guess in theory, like that would require Houston being interested in Anthony Davis. And like, I don't know if they would be. Like their problem scoring, it's not defense.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're probably going to use their assets to go get like a primary scoring option, I would guess. So you might be right. Like it might not be a great situation. And then 2030 is San Antonio receiving the most favorable. And I guess you could say like AD and Wemby is really interesting. But I don't know if that's the guy for them either.
Yeah, there's no indication San Antonio would do that from everything I understand of how they're approaching
building
the future. Yeah, how they're building.
So you might be right. Like there actually isn't like a super easy way to pivot out of this either. Like even just like really logically trying to figure this out. And they have the 2029 from the Lakers incoming. So like they're down, it's not like they don't have any picks in that window. It's just that they don't have their own picks in this window. I feel like I still would probably try to like move AD this summer if I could and maximize his asset value and like see what I could get. I mean, there are valuable picks out there. Like Brooklyn, I would imagine, would have interest in AD as they try and like rebuild on the fly a little bit. Like there are teams out there that would have interest, but we're in like fantasy land at this point now. And I don't think I see them doing this. And I guess my point here is it's harder to do this than what I thought. Like Charlotte should not be, maybe Charlotte would trade for AD. Like maybe that is an answer here. Like maybe Charlotte would be like, yes, we will give you LaMelo and a first for in that 2027 first of your own for AD.
To what end though? It's not like their roster is maybe it's
or like Miller or something. Like I don't know. I'm just like spitballing.
And I do think
out, like what the idea is.
I do think as you alluded to, I do think the context of how much they lose this season and where their pick ends up does inform some of this. If they get lucky, not necessarily like they win the whole lottery and get Cooper, but if they move up into the top four, if that is a scenario that there is a little bit of salvation if all of a sudden you add a top five guy.
If they get Cooper, it's really interesting because like I don't know how much digging you've done on Cooper yet, but like Cooper is an extremely like competitive individual who's going to be like very good from the jump in the NBA.
Yeah.
And like if you put him with Kyrie and AD, like it's actually kind of interesting at that point. Part of you wants to like just like pivot out and like rebuild completely around Cooper, right? And then part of you wants to, say, oh shit, like we got this dude. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like this might actually save us a little bit. Shit, that kind of broke my brain a little bit, Tim.
That's we can make that game about anybody. Anybody could be saved if they happen to get they'll have a chance. Or it's a bleak situation. It's a really bleak situation, and it's for the fan base just to be mired in this apathy. At some point, there are going to be fans who could have been brought back and re-engaged if this team was on the court healthy right now. But I would have to imagine at some point there's a point of no return that, just going, 6 more months of only negative news, and coverage and things like that is just going to tune people out it's going to just make it so much more difficult. And so again, maybe in that context, like, is it better to start anew and is it better to try to do get a, if you trade, if you trade AD and really focus, if you want a return that really brings back near-term first-round picks, because you're going to be bad this year, if you trade AD and you scale down the roster, you could be bad next year. Then you're going into 4 years where you don't control your own draft pick. But if you're trading out AD and getting, another pick for this draft and next draft, even if it's later on, maybe you do like a very quick rebuild and you put a bunch of, over the next 2 years, you put a bunch of young talent. You've still got Derek Lively. He'd be untouchable in this scenario. You put a bunch of young talent, and then you hope the team is at least on the ascension. They're probably not, almost certainly not contenders at that point. But you're going into the 27, the 26, 27 season, thinking, well, we have at least talent that's going to win us some games, and we'll go from there. But the thing is, Nico Harrison is just, he views the huge reason why he made this trade is because he only viewed his time a few more seasons. And so it would require him not being GM. I know we're discussing the hypothetical of how this would go about, if they moved on from him or something. But yeah, maybe that's the scenario I'd go with, if especially given the quality of this draft but specifically the next one.
Yeah. The Nico situation is going to be really interesting because, speaking to the fan base apathy, right? I think it's going to be hard for the fan base to believe while he's there. And I wonder if that is kind of even more than just the situation. I wonder if that is why they could end up making a move. If they see I don't think it'll happen this summer either, to be clear. I think it's something where they would see what it looks like next year once, they're actually getting hit in the pocketbook if fans stop going to the arena and everything.
Yeah.
But that could actually be the impetus more than anything, is just the true apathy that sets in if Nico Harrison is there. And there are just fans that truly just do not believe in it and do not buy it for a second.
Yeah. And look, the Mavericks are going to survive as a product. There's no people will always go to games, even if the numbers fall to some extent, and certainly they have been. I just don't know whether they're going to be as viable as a hobby.
Well, and the other thing is too, I've seen this conspiracy theory about the Adelsons want to move the team to Las Vegas or whatever. There's just literally no way that the NBA is abandoning Dallas as a market. It's just not a viable
100% correct. Something people
NBA.
also forget is Sands Corp is divesting from Vegas. They don't have a casino there anymore. They are. So people see Sands Corp and they think Vegas, gambling, Vegas. That's not actually what this company is focusing on right now. They're not putting their future. Yeah. They have casinos in Macau. That's where the bulk of their valuation comes from. But they are looking to build elsewhere, build out of Vegas. And so even in that context, the incorrect conspiracy theory, and again, I get where it comes from. I keep telling people, listen to the words Nico is saying. He's giving you the reasons. As far as I understand it, the reasons that he keeps saying are the reasons that he did the trade. But I also get how fans hear those reasons and are no way you could have made that decision based off those reasons. There has to be something else to it. That's how stunning of a trade it remains.
Yeah, and well, I just have to say, Macau Mavericks has a hell of a ring to it. The Macau Mavericks, league expansion internationally. Silver talks about it all the time. Let's do it. No. Second, this is one of those things that you learn whenever you talk to NBA people. I talk to NBA people all the time. The level of crazy stuff you will hear from NBA teams, and not crazy, crazy is the wrong word, I should say. The level of differing opinions you will hear on players across the board from people that work in the NBA is very real. There are people who have different opinions everywhere. You will find, I can guarantee you, I could find someone in the NBA right now that does not believe Cooper Flagg is going to make an all-NBA team, that does not believe Jalen Brunson is one of the 15 best players in the league.
Mhm.
I can find someone in the NBA right now that thinks like they would not want Anthony Davis on their team, just point blank. And that's not to say that that is the consensus opinion. That's not to say that it's the right opinion. It's not to say necessarily in some cases it's the wrong opinion. Sometimes these, I'm going to make a bad pun here, Mavericks across the league end up being proven right at the end of the day. But like, I think part of why I look at this so I can look at this so logically and like take Nico at his word on this, that he just genuinely thought that this was the right move, is that when you talk to people in the league, you hear wild shit all the time. Like you just do. Like I'm sure that you feel that way and like have had that experience as well.
Yeah. It's yes, he made the decision, and it just, there are, and a lot of it is the non-traditional background he had coming into it, and all this stuff. But yeah, no, he legitimately believed in this, and
Yeah.
yes, he had found it very difficult to work with Luka, but that was a him thing,
Yeah.
like increasingly, all the stuff, when we heard, when we brought up all the stuff that has come out about Luka behind the scenes and all this stuff, it's the same stuff that I have heard his entire career. It's not like he got traded and then all of a sudden people told me what he was really like behind the scenes. And at no point when I'd been hearing what he was like behind the scenes did it ever come with the addendum of, so that's why they got to move on from him. It was frustrating. He could be a frustrating player at times, and it's been well documented. It was documented in the moment, a lot of it, but it's been continued to be documented. But
if you go back and read,
came out that was worse.
Yeah, if you go back and read the story that you wrote on Bob Voulgaris, back in the day, right? What was that, 3 or 4 years ago, right?
2021.
Yeah, so 4 years ago. Like, and like I like Bob. Like I think Bob's like, really, really good and like
I do
knows
too.
what he's doing. Like Luka, I think didn't come off like super well there. And Bob still had the wherewithal to understand, like, no, this guy's the dude. Like, it's okay that he doesn't like me. It's not the end of the world that, he and I have a tempestuous relationship or like contentious relationship or whatever it was, like coming from Luka upward, right? It's not the worst thing in the world because he's the guy and I'm not. Like, I have the humility to understand that I'm not, the most important cog here. He is. And yes, you would like to have a relationship. Like I think everyone wants to have a relationship with their coworkers and with the people they have to be around every day. But it's just not the reality. And like nothing I've ever, and you're around the team drastically more, exponentially more than I am. Nothing I've ever heard about Luka rises to the level of, we have to get this guy off of the team.
Yeah, no, at no point did it ever, nothing I've ever heard has gotten to that point. It's just, it's unfathomable. And if Nico Harrison wanted to come in and execute his vision of a team and a franchise that wasn't already established, where the player and the system and frankly the culture was working because it got them to the NBA finals, that's one thing. It's not even solely that Nico Harrison has a fucked up vision of how basketball should be played. I'm sure if Dallas was fully healthy, they'd be still very good. It's that he came into a franchise and, burnt, ripped apart something that was already built and that he helped build.
Yeah.
But, to rip that apart is just baffling. And when people, I haven't really said this word in any of my reporting, but I've seen people throw around the word ego a lot, when it comes to how Nico came to this decision. And I think that's where it's most applicable, that if there is a moment that I would use that word, I would use it in that context, that it was the belief that the clearly working system and vision of the Mavericks was still inferior to the one he preferred.
I think that's a good way to close it. Tim, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people about everything you've got going on.
Yeah, I'm at DLLS now as part of the All City Network. So we've got we're on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter, Tim_Cato. My writing's at alldlls.com. It's all Googleable. It's all on there. So I'm sure they can find it with that info.
Go follow Tim on all the socials. Tim_Cato. He's the best. Very, very few people are better at not just covering like Dallas, obviously, but also having the context of the league as a whole and everything that goes along with it. Tim, thank you for coming on, man. This is great.
Dude, absolutely. Happy to anytime.
This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember, rate, review, subscribe. We will be back, I think tomorrow. Actually, we will be back tomorrow with Bryce. We're doing a mailbag. Send me questions on Blue Sky, on Twitter, wherever you want to. Please send them. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll talk through some questions that you guys have. See ya.